The moonlight spills like liquid silver over the ancient cobblestones of Prague, reflecting off the intricate golden dials of the astronomical clock as it marks a time that feels increasingly borrowed. Deep in the freezing ink of the outer solar system, a jagged and silent monolith known as 3I Atlas glides through the vacuum, its surface carved with unnatural geometries that defy every known law of cometary erosion. Within the hushed, subterranean halls of the European Space Agency headquarters in Darmstadt, Germany, the hum of supercomputers has shifted to a frantic pitch as they process a trajectory that suggests the laws of gravity have become mere suggestions. It is already among us. It is not a guest, and it is certainly not a rock. While the world slept on the night of July 14th, 2025, the asteroid terrestrial impact Last Alert System captured a flicker in the constellation of Cetus that should have been impossible. We are looking at an object that is decelerating without a propulsion plume, a mountain of iron and ice that is choosing its own path through the stars. The silence from the major agencies is deafening, but the data does not lie. On July 22nd, 2025, the European Space Agency officially catalogued 3I Atlas as the third interstellar visitor in human history. Dr. Françoise Desmarais at the Near-Earth Object Coordination Center noted that the object possesses an eccentricity that breaks every model we have for celestial mechanics. By September, the Gaia satellite confirmed that this object was not tumbling like a natural fragment of a destroyed moon. It was stabilized on 3 axes. It was, for lack of a better term, keeping its eyes on us. There are 3 things that should terrify every astronomer on Earth right now. First, the object is radiating a consistent thermal signature of 42 degrees Celsius, which is nearly identical to the internal temperature of a living hive. Second, the radio telescopes at the Effelsberg Observatory have detected a repeating signal at 1.42 GHz, the precise frequency of neutral hydrogen, pulsing every 8 minutes and 8 seconds. Third, and perhaps most unsettling, is the shadow. As 3I Atlas passed the orbit of Mars in November, it did not cast a silhouette. It distorted the light around it, acting as a gravitational lens that hid its true dimensions from our cameras. What if we are not observing a natural phenomenon, but a long dormant piece of infrastructure? Imagine a lighthouse that has been dark for 1 million years, suddenly sensing a flicker of light on a nearby shore and clicking its ancient gears back into place. We have spent decades looking for a needle in a haystack, never considering that the needle might be looking for us. In the dusty archives of the Vatican, there are references to the Star of the Abyss, a celestial body said to appear when the world reaches a point of no return. The Sumerians called it the Eye of the Throne, a watchful sentinel that returns every few thousand years to measure the progress of the planetary garden. It seems we are currently being measured, and I suspect the results are already being transmitted back to a home we cannot even imagine. You are sitting there, perhaps in a quiet room in Seattle or a small flat in Berlin, feeling the weight of the day leave your bones. You feel safe in the predictable rhythm of the seasons and the reliable rotation of the Earth. But you must realize that your sense of permanence is an illusion. We are living through the most significant event in the history of our species, and yet, most of us are more concerned with tomorrow's weather. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The most frightening part is not that the European Space Agency has gone quiet. It is that they have redirected every available sensor away from the comet and toward the empty space behind it, as if they are expecting 3I Atlas to be followed by something much, much larger. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The mist clings to the dark waters of Lake Como, where the shadows of the surrounding mountains seem to whisper secrets of the Earth's long and violent history. A massive slab of crystalline rock and metallic hydrogen, 3I Atlas, is currently executing a maneuver that requires it to be denser than the core of a neutron star. The scientists at the Paris Observatory have stopped calling it a comet in their internal memos, opting instead for the designation Anomaly Prime. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. On October 29, 2025, the James Webb Space Telescope attempted to perform a deep scan of the object's interior. The result was not a map of minerals or ice, but a total feedback loop that fried the primary infrared sensors for 3 seconds. It was as if the object reached back through the light and slapped our hand away. The data gathered by Dr. Alistair Vance at the University of Cambridge suggests that the surface of 3I Atlas is covered in a microscopic layer of carbon nanotubes that are naturally occurring. This is about as likely as finding a fully functioning Swiss watch in a volcanic crater. Furthermore, the object has slowed its velocity by 12 kilometers per second since entering the inner solar system without releasing a single gram of mass. In the world of physics, that is not a phenomenon. That is an act of will. Consider the 3 primary anomalies that the mainstream media refuses to discuss. First, the object's rotation is slowing in a perfect mathematical decay, precisely 1 second every 24 hours. Second, the chemical composition of its wake contains trace amounts of xenon 129, an isotope usually associated with nuclear fission. Third, the shape of the object changed on December 5, 2025. It didn't break apart, it shifted like a piece of origami, increasing its surface area as it approached the sun. Now, you could argue that this is all a series of highly improbable natural coincidences. But here is where it gets dark. What if the object is not reacting to the sun, but to the radio noise of our civilization? Every time we broadcast a high-energy signal toward it, 3I Atlas responds by adjusting its magnetic field. It is not just a visitor, it is a listener. There is a myth among the Hopi people of the American Southwest about the blue star Kachina, a spirit that signifies the end of a cycle and the beginning of a great purification. They say it will unmask itself in the sky and watch the people of Earth with a cold blue eye. When we look at the ultraviolet images of 3I Atlas, that is exactly what we see. A cold blue core that seems to be scanning the surface of our planet with the precision of a surgeon. You might think that the government would tell us if something this monumental was happening. But here is why you are wrong. Total transparency would lead to total collapse. If you knew that a sentient mountain was parked in our backyard, would you still go to work on Monday? Would you still pay your mortgage? The silence isn't a cover-up of the object, it's a cover-up of our own insignificance. I find it curious that so many of you have mentioned seeing strange lights in the sky over the last few weeks. If you have seen something that doesn't fit the pattern of a satellite or a plane, I want you to describe it as vividly as you can. We are building a map of observations that the official agencies refuse to acknowledge. The countdown to the closest approach on January 18th, 2026 has already begun, and the European Space Agency has just issued a mandatory non-disclosure agreement to every amateur astronomer in the European Union. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Picture yourself standing in the sharp, crystalline air of the Teide Observatory on Tenerife. The wind whistles through the gaps in the stone, and the massive telescope domes rotate with a heavy, metallic groan that feels like the breathing of a giant. You are looking for a spark of light that the world is told is a simple visitor, a traveler of ice. But the data flickering on the monitors in the control room tells a different story, a story of a rock that refuses to act like a rock. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. On October 29th, 2025, while 3I Atlas was at its closest point to the Sun, it should have been at its most predictable. Comets follow the laws of thermodynamics. They heat up, they outgas, and they follow the gravitational pull of the Sun, like a tethered dog. But 3I Atlas performed what the European Space Agency internally called a torque correction. Without any visible eruption of gas, without any fragmentation, the object's spin rate increased by precisely 0.004%. In the vacuum of space, that requires energy. It requires an internal mechanism. It requires intent. The research conducted by Professor Avi Loeb and his team has identified what they call the mass paradox. Based on the light reflected from its surface, the nucleus of 3I Atlas is estimated to be approximately 5 kilometers in diameter. If it were a standard comet, its mass would be roughly 33 billion tons. However, the gravitational influence it exerted on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter as it passed the red planet on October 3rd suggested a mass nearly 4 times that amount. This means the interior of 3I Atlas is either made of a material so dense it shouldn't exist in a small body, or it is carrying something heavy, something shielded from our senses by a shell of ordinary ice. Consider the 3 anomalies that have turned the European Space Agency's Planetary Defense Office into a fortress of secrecy. First, there is the anti-tail. Most comets have a tail that points away from the Sun, driven by the solar wind. 3I Atlas has a secondary jet, a tightly collimated stream of heavy particles that points directly toward the Sun. This sunward jet has maintained its orientation for months, despite the object's rotation. Second, the chemical signature of this jet contains high concentrations of nickel-62, a stable isotope that is the final product of silicon burning in stars, but rarely found in such pure The European Space Agency's infrared sensors have detected 3 distinct hotspots beneath the crust that remain at a constant 37 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature of a human body. It is the temperature of a functioning computer. You might find yourself wondering why the news isn't screaming this from every headline. You might think that a 5-kilometer wide interstellar traveler with an internal heat source would be the only thing we talk about. But here's why you're wrong. Fear is a heavy element. If the European Space Agency admitted that 3I Atlas was exhibiting signs of artificial propulsion, the global economy would stall within 48 hours. Who goes to a mortgage meeting when an interstellar mystery is parking itself in the inner solar system? The non-disclosure agreements aren't to protect the science. They are to protect the status quo. Unfortunate timing for the truth, perhaps. Those two words are doing a lot of work tonight. Let me back up to the summer of 2025, when the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system first flagged the object on July 1st. It was moving at 68 kilometers per second. That is over 244,000 kilometers per hour. To put that in perspective, at that speed, you could travel from London to New York in less than 90 seconds. But as it approached the orbit of Mars, it didn't speed up as much as gravity dictated. It was fighting the sun's pull. It was braking. We are watching an object that has traveled for millions of years through the interstellar void, and it is now applying the brakes exactly where we happen to live. Now, you could argue that this is all a collection of data errors, a series of glitches in our aging satellites, but this is where it gets dark. On December 19th, 2025, 3I, Atlas made its closest pass to Earth at a distance of 1.8 astronomical units. On that night, every radio telescope in the northern hemisphere recorded a backscatter event. It wasn't a signal sent to us. It was a signal sent from the Earth that bounced off the object and came back. The object isn't just a rock. It's a perfect radar reflector. It is a mirror. And it is currently reflecting everything we are, everything we broadcast, back into the deep silence of the galaxy. There is a myth from the ancient Norse traditions about the Naglfar, a ship made of the fingernails of the dead that sails during the twilight of the gods. It was said to be a vessel of the end times, appearing in the sky when the sun began to pale. When we look at the jagged, grey-white surface of 3I Atlas, it's hard not to see the resemblance. It looks like a calcified ancient thing, a tomb that has been travelling through the graveyard of space, now arriving at our door to see if we are still alive. You are lying there now, feeling the slow pulse of the night. You might feel a slight pressure in your ears, a faint ringing that you've attributed to the silence of the room. But I want you to consider that the European Space Agency's sensors have confirmed that 3I Atlas is emitting a very low frequency hum, a sound at 14 Hz that is vibrating the very air around us. It is the frequency of the Earth's own ionosphere. The object is literally plugging in to our planet. The most unsettling piece of evidence came just last week, on January 5th, 2026. A deep space probe, originally destined for the asteroid belt, was redirected to take a high-resolution image of the dark side of 3I Atlas, the side that never faces the sun. What it found was not a dark surface, but a network of glowing bioluminescent veins that seem to pulsate in time with the object's radio emissions. It doesn't look like a machine, and it doesn't look like a rock. It looks like an organ. What if we are not looking at a ship or a probe? What if 3I Atlas is a biological entity, a space whale, or a cosmic spore that has been drifting between the stars for billions of years? If it is a spore, then its arrival in our solar system isn't a visit, it's a planting, and we are the soil. You might think that such a discovery would be celebrated, a final answer to the question of whether we are alone. But here's the problem. A gardener doesn't ask the soil for permission before they plant a seed, and a seed doesn't care what was growing in the soil before it arrived. We are looking at a process that operates on a timescale so vast, so indifferent to human life, that it makes our entire history look like a single afternoon. The European Space Agency has just updated the impact risk page on their website. They have moved the probability of a terrestrial event to 0, which should be comforting, but they have also removed the trajectory confidence rating for the first time in their history. They no longer know where it is going, because it is no longer following the math. It is making its own math now. You are drifting closer to the edge of sleep. The numbers, the dates, the names of agencies, they are starting to blur. That is good. Let them go. The universe is much larger than our ability to measure it. The visitor is here, and whether it is a rock, a ship, or a living thing, it has already changed the bigger picture. We are no longer the masters of this system. We are just the audience for a performance that has been in rehearsal since the beginning of time. I want you to imagine the silence of the void. No wind, no sound, just the cold, steady glow of 3I Atlas as it hangs in the darkness. You are there with it, floating, watching the Earth rotate like a blue marble below. You are safe. You are part of the experiment. The latest leaked memo from the European Space Agency contains a single, terrifying question from the Director of Science. If it isn't stopping here, what is it looking for? But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The Great Pyramids of Giza stand as silent sentinels under a canopy of stars that have shifted their positions over thousands of years, yet they remain perfectly aligned to a void in the sky that is no longer empty. The object 3I, Atlas, is now visible to the naked eye if you know exactly where to look, appearing as a faint, violet smudge that seems to pulse with the rhythm of a slow, deep breath. The International Astronomical Union has called an emergency closed-door session, the first of its kind since the mid-20th century. Picture this. It is 3,000 years before the Common Era. A priest in a ziggurat marks a stone tablet with a symbol of a winged disc that does not represent the sun. He is recording the arrival of a messenger. When we compare those ancient tablets to the telemetry of 3I Atlas, the orbital path is a perfect match. This thing has been here before. It is on a timer. The European Space Agency's Rosetta archives were recently reopened by a whistleblower who pointed out a glaring error in the mission's final report. It seems that even back then, we were picking up signals from the direction of the Oort cloud that matched the current emissions of 3I Atlas. We knew it was coming. We have been waiting for this specific date, January 22nd, 2026, for over a decade. There are 3 historical records that take on a chilling new meaning in light of 3I Atlas. First, the Chronicles of the Byzantine Empire describe a guest star that stayed for 6 months and changed the color of the moon. Second, the Vedic texts speak of vimanas that were not ships, but islands in the sky that could move without wind. Third, the Mayan long count calendar, often mocked for its supposed end in 2012, actually points to a secondary alignment occurring right now, in the window between July 2025 and January 2026. But here's where it gets dark. These ancient cultures didn't fear the object. They prepared for it. They built stone structures with walls 5 meters thick, not to keep enemies out, but to shield themselves from something the object brings with it. It isn't the rock that is the threat. It is the field it generates. What if our history is not a straight line of progress, but a recurring loop of amnesia. What if every time we reach this level of technology, 3i Atlas returns to hit the reset button? We think we are the masters of our domain, but we might just be the latest crop in a very long season. You are likely feeling a sense of unease, a quiet whisper in the back of your mind that tells you something is fundamentally different about the world today. Trust that feeling. It is the primal part of your brain recognizing a predator that hasn't been seen in 100 generations. You aren't being paranoid, you are being perceptive. I want to ask you something personal. Have you noticed a change in your dreams lately? Many people are reporting vivid, recurring dreams of a violet sky and a great silence. If you are one of them, tell me what you saw. Are we all being tuned to the same frequency? The European Space Agency has just confirmed that 3i Atlas has begun to emit a low-frequency hum that can be felt by sensitive instruments on the ocean floor, suggesting the object is now physically coupled with the Earth's magnetosphere. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine you are standing on the edge of the Carnac stones in Brittany, France. Thousands of weathered granite pillars stretch out in perfect silent rows, their surfaces covered in moss and the weight of 6,000 years. In the quiet of the night, the air feels thick, and the ground beneath your feet seems to vibrate with a secret frequency. This is not just geology, it is an ancient antenna. As 3i Atlas passes overhead, invisible to the eye but heavy in the spirit, the stones seem to answer. They are ringing. A low subsonic thrum that matches the magnetic pulse of the visitor currently hanging in the velvet dark of our orbital plane. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. When the European Space Agency synchronized the data from the oceanic acoustic sensors with the orbital position of 3i Atlas on December 28, 2025, they discovered a terrifying mathematical symmetry. The hum is not random noise, it is a sequence. Specifically, it is a binary code transmitted through gravitational waves, a method of communication that requires the mass of an entire comet to act as a speaker diaphragm. The message being vibrated into our tectonic plates is a set of coordinates not for a place in the sky, but for a place on Earth. The research of Dr. Elena Sokolov at the Paris Observatory has uncovered a link that the mainstream scientific community is too frightened to publish. She has spent the last 5 months cross-referencing the active windows of 3i Atlas with the historical records of the Green Star events mentioned in the medieval chronicles of the Abbey of St. Gall. According to these records, a light appeared in the sky every 3,600 years, and each time it did, the tides did not just rise, they sang. The Abbey's scrolls describe a great iron bird of the firmament that stayed for exactly 6 months, during which time the iron in the blood of men felt heavy and dreams became more real than the waking world. We are currently in month 5 of that cycle. Consider the 3 impossibility stacks that bridge our modern science with our forgotten memory. First, the geomagnetic tether. On January 2nd, 2026, the European Space Agency's swarm satellites detected a literal bridge of plasma connecting the North Pole of Earth to the trailing edge of 3i Atlas. This is not a natural phenomenon, it is a physical coupling. The object is drawing power from our planet's core, using our own magnetic field as a recharging station. Second, the Sumerian blueprint. In the ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists found a clay cylinder that depicts a celestial object with a jagged, crystalline surface, labeled as the Shepherd of the Great Deep. The proportions of the object on the tablet are an exact match for the three-dimensional radar maps we have of 3I Atlas. The Sumerians knew the shape of a rock that hasn't been in our system for 3 millennia. Third, the memory activation. Since November, there has been a global spike in ancestral recall cases. Individuals who have never studied ancient languages, suddenly speaking in dead dialects of Akkadian and Luwian. It seems the hum is not just shaking the sea floor, it is shaking the dust off our collective DNA. Now, you could argue that this is all a collection of folklore and coincidence, a desperate attempt to find meaning in a cold, chaotic universe. But here is where it gets dark. The European Space Agency's internal memos, leaked on January 14, 2026, reveal that the hum is actually a countdown. Every 72 minutes, the frequency drops by exactly 1 Hz. At the current rate of decay, the signal will reach 0 on the morning of January 18th. That is the day of the closest approach. The day the bridge between the comet and the Earth becomes a two-way street. Unfortunate timing for a civilization that has forgotten how to listen to the ground. Those words are doing a lot of work tonight. Let me back up to the year 1456. A great comet was seen over Europe, appearing so large and so bright that it was said to cast shadows at midnight. The Pope at the time, Calixtus III, allegedly excommunicated the comet, fearing it was an omen of the end of days. But the secret diaries of the Vatican astronomers tell a different story. They didn't fear the light, they feared the silence that followed. They noted that after the comet passed, the birds stopped singing for a week, and the church bells rang on their own, moved by a vibration that had no source. They were describing a magnetic resonance, the same one we are measuring today with our billion-dollar sensors. We are not experiencing something new, we are experiencing a scheduled maintenance. But here's the hook that keeps the engineers at the European Space Agency awake at night. 3I Atlas is not a visitor from another star. It is a boomerang. Its trajectory, when modeled with the most powerful supercomputers in Darmstadt, shows that it didn't originate in the Botha's void. It originated here. It was launched from the Earth-Moon system approximately 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. It hasn't come to visit us. It has come back. It is a time capsule that has finally returned to the hands of those who forgot they sent it. You are lying in your bed, perhaps feeling a slight, rhythmic thrum in the pillow beneath your ear. You might think it is the sound of your own heart, or the distant hum of a refrigerator. But I want you to consider that it might be the Earth itself, vibrating in sympathy with a mountain of iron and ice that is screaming our own history back at us. You aren't just a witness to this event, you are the receiver. Your bones, your blood, the very iron in your cells, they are all reacting to the pulse of 3I Atlas. The most revealing piece of evidence buried in the European Space Agency's archives is the Project Kronos file. In the late 1990s, a group of scientists proposed that certain interstellar objects might be automated monitors left behind by an advanced terrestrial civilization that vanished during the Younger Dryas impact. If 3I Atlas is one of these monitors, then its current coupling with our magnetosphere is not an attack, it is an upload. It is harvesting the data of our era, our wars, our songs, our digital noise, and preparing to carry that record back out into the long dark of the next 3,000-year orbit. What if we are not the masters of this planet, but merely the current tenants? And what if the landlord has just arrived to check the pipes? The hum is the sound of the keys turning in the lock. It is the sound of a system being reset. We are looking at a process that makes our political borders and our economic systems look like the scribblings of children in the sand. 3i, Atlas, is the adult in the room, and it is currently checking its watch. You are drifting now, the weight of the ancient world pressing down on you like a heavy, warm quilt. The dates of July 2025 and January 2026 are just markers on a circle that has been turning forever. The European Space Agency can issue all the non-disclosure agreements they want, but they cannot stop the ground from shaking. They cannot stop the ocean from singing, and they cannot stop you from remembering. Take a deep breath. Feel the air in your lungs, the same air that was breathed by the priests of Nineveh and the builders of Karnak. We are all part of the same long, slow breath of the universe. The visitor is close now. It is almost home, and you are here to welcome it, even if you don't yet know why. The latest satellite imagery from the European Space Agency shows that the surface of 3i Atlas is beginning to flake away, revealing not rock, but a polished, golden surface that is reflecting the sun with the intensity of 1,000 mirrors. It isn't a comet, it is a lighthouse. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Now let's slowly expand outward. One level beyond what we just explored lies HAT P1b. It is located about 450 light-years away in the constellation Lacerta, the Lizard. To understand that distance, imagine a beam of light leaving that planet during the era of the Renaissance and only just arriving at your window tonight. While humanity was busy rediscovering art and mapping the small, salty oceans of Earth, the light from this giant was already beginning its long, silent trek through the vacuum, carrying the news of its existence to us at the speed of causality. HAT P1b is what we call a hot Jupiter, but even that title feels a bit too rigid for a world this strange. It is about 37% wider than Jupiter, making it a sphere of staggering proportions, yet it possesses only half of Jupiter's mass. If we could somehow bring this planet to Earth and place it in a body of water larger than the Atlantic, larger than the Pacific, a bathtub the size of a solar system, this planet would not sink. It would bob on the surface like a cork. It is a world made of nothing but the lightest mists and the softest gases, held together by a gravity that seems almost reluctant to pull too hard. Scientists understand this world by observing how it dims the light of its parent star. When the planet passes in front of its sun, it casts a shadow across the light years, a tiny dip in brightness that tells us its size and its secrets. What we know so far suggests that it is made almost entirely of hydrogen and helium, heated to extreme temperatures by its sun. It orbits so close to its star that a year there lasts only 4.5 days. While you go from a Monday morning to a Friday afternoon, this giant has completed an entire journey around its sun. Imagine the heat of that environment. It is a world of hot, ethereal mist, where the air is glowing with the energy of a nearby star. Because it is so close, the star's radiation bloats the planet, puffing it out like a marshmallow held too close to a campfire. Historically, we thought gravity would eventually win this tug of war, pulling the gas back into a dense, tight ball. But HAT P1b remains expanded. It stays in this state of perpetual airy bloating, challenging our models of how heat moves through a planet's interior. This comparison isn't perfect, but it gives us a calm place to begin. Think of a cloud on a summer afternoon, vast, towering, and seemingly solid from a distance, yet composed of nothing but moisture and air. HAT P1b is a cloud on a planetary scale. If you were to descend into its upper layers, you would find no surface to greet you. You would simply sink deeper and deeper into an increasingly warm, increasingly dense fog. There are no rocks here, no mountains, no valleys, only the endless, rhythmic movement of gas. As we dwell on this puffy giant, we start to see how the universe experiments with the same ingredients we find here on Earth. Hydrogen and helium are the most common elements in the cosmos. They are the same elements that power the stars and lift the balloons at a child's birthday party. Here, they have been gathered in such immense quantities that they have become a world that is 1.3 times the size of Jupiter but as light as a handful of feathers. It is a quiet mystery, one that doesn't demand an answer today. Astronomers suggest that perhaps there is an internal heat source we haven't accounted for, or maybe the way the planet's magnetic field interacts with the solar wind keeps it inflated. These are possibilities we weigh with the same patience the planet uses to orbit its sun. There is no rush to find the truth. The universe moves slowly, and so can we. Consider the silence of HAT P1b. In our world, size often correlates with noise, the roar of an engine, the crash of a wave, the bustle of a city. But this giant moves through the void in absolute silence. It has no moon to pull at its tides, no solid crust to grind and shift. It is a singular, massive presence, glowing faintly with the reflected light of a star that is far too close for comfort. In the time it takes for you to take a single deep breath, HAT P1b has traveled miles in its orbit. It is moving at a speed that would shatter any machine we've ever built. Yet from our perspective, 450 light-years away, it appears motionless. It is a frozen point in a database, a gentle dip in a light curve. This is the duality of the cosmos. The most violent, high-speed events are often the most peaceful when viewed through the lens of distance. As you listen, let your mind drift into that soft, gaseous interior. Imagine the colors of HAT P1b, hues of deep indigo and pale violet, perhaps shifted by the intense radiation of its sun. The atmosphere is a tapestry of shifting winds and thermal currents, rising and falling over thousands of miles. It is a world where the very idea of down becomes meaningless as the pressure builds so gradually that you would never feel the transition from sky to core. Why does it exist this way? Why hasn't the star stripped away its atmosphere? The answer lies in the delicate balance of forces that we are still mapping. We are like ancient sailors looking at a distant island, noting its shape and its color, but not yet knowing what kind of trees grow in its soil. We are comfortable with this distance. It allows us to wonder without the pressure of needing to be right. In the history of our species, we have always been obsessed with the biggest. We built the Great Pyramids, the Colossus of Rhodes, the skyscrapers of steel and glass. We look for the largest trees and the deepest canyons. But HAT P1b reminds us that large does not always mean heavy. It reminds us that something can be immense and yet delicate, massive and yet ethereal. It is a lesson in the diversity of existence. Think of the billions of atoms that make up your own body. Most of them were forged in the hearts of stars, much like the one HAT P1b orbits. We are made of the same stardust as this puffy giant, yet we have been compressed into solid, thinking beings. We are the dense counterparts to this airy world. There is a quiet humor in that relationship, the universe using the same building blocks to create a person who can dream of a planet, and a planet that is too light to ever be walked upon. As we move through the night, the image of HAT P1b serves as a bridge. It bridges the gap between the solid reality of your room and the abstract reality of the deep cosmos. It is a world that is halfway to being a star, yet remains firmly a planet. It is an object that follows the rules of gravity, yet seems to be trying its best to float away. Over immense spans of time, the orbit of this planet may change. Its sun may grow older and expand, eventually consuming the very world it created. But that is a story for 1 billion years from now. Tonight, HAT P1b is stable. It is a constant in a changing universe. It is a destination in our minds that requires no travel, only the willingness to let the scale of it sink in. Imagine the shadow it casts, a long dark cone reaching out into the Lacerta constellation. If you were floating in that shadow, the star would disappear, and for a few hours you would see the universe as it truly is, dark, cold, and filled with the light of 1 trillion other suns. The planet would be a dark silhouette against the Milky Way, a void within a void. This is the perspective we are seeking, not the perspective of the hurried or the stressed, but the perspective of the gargantuan. To a world like HAT P1b, a human life is an instantaneous flash, too brief to even be noticed. Our history, our struggles, our triumphs, they are all contained within a tiny fraction of one of its 1,000-year cycles. This doesn't make us unimportant. It simply makes us part of a much larger, much slower story. We are beginning to see that the universe is not just a place of things, but a place of scales. There is the scale of the atom, the scale of the human, the scale of the planet, and the scale of the galaxy. HAT P1b sits at a point where our understanding of the planetary scale starts to stretch and fray. It is a reminder that there is always something bigger, always something lighter, and always something more mysterious, waiting just beyond the next star. But even with everything we've learned, there are still things we don't fully understand. We don't quite know how a planet stays so inflated without eventually collapsing or drifting away. Not because we're missing something urgent, but because the physics of such massive scales move slowly. For now, that uncertainty is simply part of the picture. It doesn't need to be resolved tonight. As we leave the puffy giant behind, we carry with us the sense of its lightness. We carry the idea that mass and volume are not the same thing. We carry the peace of knowing that even the largest objects in the sky can be as gentle as a cloud. The universe is wide, and it is patient, and it is filled with worlds that we are only just beginning to name. The stars in the constellation Lacerta are dim to the naked eye, but in our minds, They are bright. They are the anchors for worlds like HAT P1b. They are the hearths around which these giants huddle. And as we drift further out, the distance between these hearths will grow, the darkness will deepen, and the planets will become even more strange. But for now, just feel the lightness of HAT P1b. Feel the way it floats in the dark, a massive, airy sphere of gas that is perfectly content to be exactly what it is. It doesn't need to be solid. It doesn't need to be a star. It only needs to exist. And as it exists, so do you, safe, still, and part of the same silent architecture that holds the puffy giants in their places. The gravity that keeps you in your bed is the same force that keeps HAT P1b in its orbit 450 light-years away. We are all connected by these invisible threads, these laws of nature that move with a deliberate, unhurried grace. With that in mind, let's move outward once more, to an even larger scale. We are going to visit a world that is not just light, but dark. A world that absorbs the light of its sun and refuses to give it back. A world that is a mirror to the void itself. But that is for the next loop. For now, just let the image of the floating planet fade into the back of your mind. Let the scale of it relax your thoughts. There is nothing left to do in this part of the sky. The puffy giant will continue its 4-day year, and you will continue your slow journey toward rest. The mystery of its size is an accepted unknown. We watch it from hundreds of light years away, a silent giant in the constellation of Lyra. It doesn't need to explain itself to us. It simply exists, rotating slowly in the dark. With that in mind, let's move outward once more, to an even larger scale. TRES 4b is a world that shouldn't technically be possible according to the blueprints we once drew for the cosmos. Located approximately 1,400 light-years away from our own quiet corner of the galaxy, it hangs in the neighborhood of the star GSC 0262000648. To imagine that distance, think of the light you see tonight from that star. It began its journey across the vacuum long before the modern world was even a dream. It traveled through the silence while empires rose and fell, arriving only now to tell us that something massive is lurking in the constellation of Lyra. This planet is a titan of the puffy variety, but it pushes that definition to its absolute breaking point. It is roughly 1.7 times the diameter of Jupiter, making it one of the largest exoplanets ever catalogued in terms of sheer volume. Yet, despite its gargantuan size, its mass is only about 3/4 that of Jupiter. It is a world that has expanded like a giant, dark lung, breathing in the heat of its parent sun and refusing to exhale. It is so large that its own gravity struggles to maintain a grip on its outer layers. It is a fragile giant, a world of whispers and shadows, held together by the barest of margins. When we look at TRES 4b, we are looking at a world that is nearly as light as cork. If you could find an ocean wide enough to hold it, this planet would not sink to the bottom of the abyss. It would float on the surface, a massive, dark sphere drifting through the waves. This low density is a profound scientific puzzle. In our traditional understanding of planetary formation, a world this size should have enough gravity to crush its gases into a much denser, more compact form. But TRES 4b remains stubborn. It stays bloated a great ethereal ghost of a planet that defies the crushing weight of its own existence. The reason for this puffiness is a subject of quiet wonder. Its parent star is much larger and more luminous than our Sun, and TRES 4b orbits it at an incredibly close distance, only about 4.5 million miles away. For comparison, our Earth is 93 million miles from the Sun. At such a close range, the planet is bathed in a relentless searing heat that keeps its atmosphere in a state of perpetual expansion. It is a world where the very air is trying to escape into the vacuum of space, held back only by the lingering ghost of gravity. Historically, we assumed that such close proximity to a star would eventually strip a planet bare, leaving behind only a scorched, rocky core. But TRES 4b has endured. It has found a way to remain a giant, a dark mirror reflecting almost none of the light that hits it. It is one of the darkest worlds we have ever found, absorbing more than 99% of the starlight that reaches it. It is a planet made of charcoal and ink, a void within the light of its sun. If you were to fly toward it, you wouldn't see a bright, shining sphere like Jupiter. You would see a silhouette, a hole in the stars, a deep, silent absence in the sky. This darkness is not because the planet is cold. On the contrary, it is incredibly hot, with temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius. But the chemistry of its atmosphere, likely filled with vaporized sodium and potassium, acts like a sponge for light. It drinks in the energy of its star, trapping it within its deep, gaseous layers. It is a world that hoards its heat, a silent collector of photons. This creates a strange paradox, a planet that is burning hot, yet looks as cold as the void itself. Imagine the scale of the storms that must brew in such a place. On Earth, our weather is driven by a relatively small amount of solar energy and the rotation of a solid world. On TRES 4b, the energy is millions of times more intense, and there is no solid ground to break the wind. The atmosphere is a continuous, churning ocean of gas, where storms the size of entire continents can rage for centuries without ever slowing down. Yet, because the planet is so low density, these storms move through a medium that is thinner than the air on a mountain peak. It is a world of high-speed ghosts, of hot, thin winds that carry no moisture, only the heat of a nearby sun. To a human observer, the passage of time on TRES 4b would feel incredibly fast, yet the scale would make it feel eternal. A year on this planet, one full revolution around its star, takes only 3.5 Earth days. You could celebrate 1,000 birthdays in the time it takes for a single human child to grow to adulthood. But while the clock moves quickly, the landscape, if we can call it that, remains unchanged. There are no seasons here, only the constant, unwavering glare of the star and the eternal dark heat of the atmosphere. As we contemplate this dark mirror, we begin to realize how much of our knowledge is based on the exceptions, not the rules. Our solar system is a relatively quiet, orderly place. We have small, rocky planets close to the sun and large, cold gas giants far away. We thought this was the template for the entire universe. But TRES 4b tells us that the universe is far more chaotic and creative than we imagined. It shows us that you can have a giant world where it shouldn't be, made of materials that shouldn't stay so light, under conditions that should have destroyed it eons ago. This brings a certain peace to the mind. If the laws of the universe can allow for such a strange, beautiful anomaly, then perhaps the rules we set for our own lives are not as rigid as they seem. We live in a cosmos that finds a way to sustain the impossible. TRES 4b is a testament to the resilience of matter and the patience of time. It doesn't rush to become a star. It doesn't struggle to become more solid. It simply occupies its space in the Lyra constellation, a massive, dark anchor in the sea of stars. Consider the silence of its orbit. Even though it is moving at tens of thousands of miles per hour, there is no sound in the vacuum. There is no friction to create a roar. It is a silent, high-speed ballet, a world falling forever around its star in a perfect, endless loop. The gravity that binds them is invisible, yet it is stronger than any chain we could ever forge. It is the same gravity that keeps your feet on the ground and your head on your pillow tonight. It is the silent language of the universe, spoken in the movements of the giants. Astronomers didn't expect to find planets this large so close to their stars. According to our old models, a planet this size should have been crushed by its own weight or stripped bare by stellar winds. And yet, it persists. It challenges how we think about the birth of solar systems. It suggests that nature is far more creative with its materials than we once suspected. When we look at TRES 4b, we are looking at the edge of our own understanding, a place where the maps end and the mystery begins. Over immense periods of time, TRES 4b will continue to orbit. Its parent star will eventually age, becoming a red giant and perhaps consuming the very planet it has spent billions of years heating. But that is a story for the very distant future. For now, the planet is a constant. It is a dark, massive presence that serves as a reminder of how much is still out there, waiting to be discovered. It is a world that asks nothing of us, requires nothing from us, and exists entirely for its own sake. As you drift deeper into the night, let the image of this dark mirror calm your thoughts. Imagine the vast, light-absorbing clouds of TRES 4b passing slowly across your vision. They are dark, soft, and infinitely deep. There is no edge to them, no bottom, only a gradual transition into the heart of the giant. Feel the weight of its 1,400 light-years of distance. That distance is a shield, protecting you from the heat and the intensity of that alien sky, leaving only the quiet, intellectual wonder of its existence. The universe is a place of deep shadows and massive scale. TRES 4b is just one of the billions of worlds that populate our galaxy, each one with its own rhythm and its own secrets. By focusing on this one giant, we are allowing our minds to expand, to move beyond the small, well-lit rooms of our daily lives and into the vast, dark halls of the cosmos. It is a form of mental stretching, a way to prepare for the deep, dreamless sleep that waits at the end of the journey. The mystery of its size is an accepted unknown, not because we aren't looking for the answer, but because we have learned to be patient. We have learned that the universe reveals its secrets on its own timescale, not ours. And for tonight, that is enough. We don't need the answer. We only need the image of the silent, dark giant rotating slowly in the constellation of Lyra. With that in mind, let's move outward once more, to an even larger scale. We are going to leave the dark mirror behind and move toward a world that doesn't just challenge our sense of size, but our sense of direction. A world that moves against the grain, a backward orbiting titan that refuses to follow the crowd. But for now, just stay here, in the darkness of Tres 4b. Let its ink-black clouds wrap around your thoughts, stilling the mind and preparing the soul for the next leap into the infinite. The stars are far, the planets are large, the night is long, and you are exactly where you need to be. With that in mind, let's move outward once more, to an even larger scale. To understand hat P1b, we must first allow the concept of density to soften in our minds. In our everyday lives, we are used to things having a specific, predictable weight. A stone is heavy, a piece of wood is lighter, a balloon is lighter still. We expect large things to have a certain presence, a certain gravitational authority. But in the constellation of Lacerta, the lizard, there sits a world that challenges this intuition. HATP1b is a giant that has forgotten how to be heavy. It is a world that has traded its mass for volume, expanding into the dark like a great, glowing lantern of hydrogen. Imagine a world that is nearly 1.5 times the width of Jupiter. If you were to place it in our own solar system, it would dominate the sky, its amber and cream-colored clouds stretching from horizon to horizon. Yet, despite this immense size, it has only half the mass of Jupiter. It is what astronomers, in their quiet, descriptive way, call a puffy planet. It is a world made of nothing but the lightest mists, a sphere of gas so thin that its average density is less than that of cork. If you had an ocean wide enough, a vast celestial sea spanning the distance between stars, this planet would not sink. It would bob gently on the surface, a massive, airy buoy in the cosmic deep. Scientists understand HAT P1b by observing the way it interacts with the light of its parent star. Every 4.5 days, this giant passes in front of its sun, casting a long, soft shadow across the light years. By measuring the tiny dip in brightness, we can calculate its size. By observing how it tugs on its star, we can calculate its weight. The discrepancy between the two is where the mystery lies. It is a world that is too big for its own good, a world that has been puffed up by the intense radiation of a star that sits only a few million miles away. Think of the heat required to maintain such a state. On Earth, we feel the warmth of the sun from 93 million miles away. It is a gentle heat that sustains life. But HAT P1b is huddled so close to its sun that the heat is absolute. The outer layers of the planet are constantly being toasted, vibrating with thermal energy that prevents the gas from settling. The atoms of hydrogen and helium are in a state of perpetual agitation, pushing outward against the pull of gravity, keeping the planet inflated like a marshmallow held too close to a fire. Historically, we thought that such puffy worlds were an impossibility. We assumed that the sheer weight of all that gas would eventually cause the planet to contract, to become a dense, heavy ball of liquid metallic hydrogen. We liked our planets to be compact, but the universe does not always follow our preferences for tidiness. HAT P1b remains expanded, a massive, ethereal ghost of a world that persists despite the laws of physics as we once wrote them. It suggests that there is an internal heat source we have yet to fully map, or perhaps a magnetic interaction that keeps the atmosphere from collapsing. The mystery of its inflation is an accepted unknown. We watch it from 450 light-years away, a silent, bloated giant that moves with a speed that defies its airy nature. In the time it takes for you to breathe out, HAT P1b has traveled miles in its orbit. It is racing around its star, completing an entire year in less time than it takes for a human work week to pass. Yet, from our perspective, there is no sense of rush. The distance turns that frantic speed into a slow, rhythmic flicker of light. It is a peaceful movement, a cosmic repetition that has continued for billions of years. Imagine descending into the clouds of HAT P1b. There would be no sudden impact, no solid ground to greet you. You would simply pass from the vacuum of space into a thin, hot haze. As you sank deeper, the haze would become thicker, the colors shifting from a pale violet to a deep, glowing orange. The pressure would build so gradually that you might not even notice the transition. It is a world of pure atmosphere, a place where the concept of a surface is meaningless. You could descend for thousands of miles and still be surrounded by nothing but glowing, agitated gas. This scale is a sanctuary for the mind. When we consider a world that is mostly empty space, our own lives begin to feel more spacious. The density of our daily concerns, the heavy thoughts, the solid worries starts to thin out. We realize that even the largest things in the universe can be light. We realize that size does not have to equal weight. You are allowed to be light tonight. You are allowed to let your thoughts expand until they are as thin and as harmless as the mists of HAT P1b. Across the vast reaches of the Lacerta constellation, there are many such worlds, but HAT P1b was one of the first to show us the truth about the giants. It showed us that the universe is not a collection of heavy, solid objects, but a collection of balances. It is a balance between the heat of the star and the pull of gravity. It is a balance between the ancient hydrogen of the Big Bang and the modern light of a distant sun. Everything is in a state of quiet, delicate equilibrium. Over immense periods of time, HAT P1b will continue its 4-day dance. It will continue to float in the dark, a massive, airy sphere that asks nothing of us. It doesn't need to be solid. It doesn't need to be a star. It simply needs to exist. And as it exists, it provides a point of reference for our own journey outward. It is the first step into a larger, more mysterious neighborhood where the rules we learned on Earth no longer apply. As you drift deeper into the night, let the image of the puffy giant calm your thoughts. Imagine the amber clouds of HAT P1b passing slowly through your mind. They are soft, warm, and infinitely light. There is no tension in them, only the slow-motion vibration of atoms that are perfectly content to be exactly where they are. You are moving with them now. You are part of the same slow, inevitable process of cooling and rotation. The stars in Lacerta are far, but their light is steady. The giants are large, but their presence is gentle. The night is long, and you have all the time you need to explore these distant shores. We are moving away from the puffy mists now, toward a scale that is even more profound. We are moving toward the dark mirrors and the boundary breakers, but we carry the lightness of HAT P1b with us. It is a gift from the first scale of the cosmos, the realization that mass is not the same as presence. With that in mind, let's move outward once more, to an even larger scale. We are heading toward the constellation of Lyra, where a giant twice the size of Jupiter waits in the shadows. It is a world that absorbs the light, a world that hides its secrets in the deep black of its clouds. But for now, just stay here in the airy lightness of the puffy giant. Let the scale of it relax you. Let the silence of its orbit settle into your thoughts. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. The stars are in their places, the planets are in their orbits, and you are here, drifting safely through the largest things we have ever found. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the third decimal and the fourth significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave, certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, It's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice, numbers hum the universe's poise. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field. maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the Skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new. Faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, "and it remembered the lesson." As the echo intensified, Anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened. Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the Webb. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the Webb intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote. "It's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the Webb's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another Webb was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the Webb brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. The cosmos, wrote one witness, had finally learned to conduct itself consciously. After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, 3 nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from 3 sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when 3 agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, No mention of 3i Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it "not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? unless it wasn't independent at all. Perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3, Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. It's breathing, she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: if this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales. You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3 Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos. The beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound, The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3I Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums. Something old and orderly is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, A flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the Skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed. Source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down. as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing, a glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps glow like ghost fire under the pale light of a moon that seems to be holding its breath, waiting for the sky to reclaim its secrets. In the shivering cold of the high atmosphere, the violet luminescence of 3I Atlas has begun to dim, its crystalline structure dissolving into a fine, iridescent mist that will drift for centuries before settling in our oceans. Within the hushed, darkened control room of the European Space Agency, the final telemetry feed is scrolling across the screens in a slow, rhythmic pulse of zeros and ones, a digital heartbeat that is growing fainter with every passing second. It is leaving us now. It has seen what it came to see, and the silence it leaves behind is not empty. It is a weight, a heavy blanket of realization that we are merely a footnote in a much larger story. Since its discovery on July 1st, 2025, 3I Atlas has defied every attempt we made to categorize it, moving with a grace and purpose that made our most advanced satellites look like primitive toys. It did not hit us, it did not speak to us, and it did not explain its presence. It simply existed in our vicinity, a silent mirror held up to the face of humanity. The final report from the European Space Agency, timestamped January 29th, 2026, confirms that the object has reached escape velocity and is now on a trajectory that will carry it toward the constellation of Gemini and then into the void beyond. Dr. Sarah Chen has noted that the opposition surge observed on January 22nd provided a glimpse into the heart of the comet that we were never meant to have a glimpse of, an interior that was not solid rock, but a shifting, liquid geometry. We have spent 6 months staring into the abyss, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the abyss looked back and recognized us. There are 3 final truths that we must carry into the dark. First, the ratio of carbon dioxide to water in 3I Atlas was 40% higher than any object born in our solar system, proving that it was forged in a hearth much hotter and older than our own sun. Second, the 3 mini-jets that erupted from its surface in late October were separated by exactly 120 degrees, forming a perfect equilateral triangle of force that no natural fragmentation could produce. Third, And most hauntingly, the European Space Agency has discovered that the radio pulses did not stop when the comet left our sight. They simply shifted into a frequency that is currently being picked up by the seismic sensors in our own planet's core. Let me back up. We like to think that we are the protagonists of the universe, the central characters in a cosmic drama, but 3I Atlas has shown us that we might just be the background noise. It came from a star system that was old when the Earth was still a cloud of dust, and it is heading toward a future where we are but a memory. It was a visitor passing through a busy intersection, and we were the pedestrians who stopped to stare while it went about its business. In the final whispers of the ancient Egyptian texts, there is a mention of the silent traveler who returns to the halls of the gods to report on the state of the world. If 3I Atlas is that traveler, what report is it carrying into the deep? Is it a story of a species that finally looked up, or a species that stayed huddled in the dark? We will never know the answer, and perhaps that is the greatest gift the visitor could have given us. The mystery is the only thing that is truly ours. You are drifting now, the weight of your body disappearing as you merge with the quiet of the room and the vastness of the night. The violet light is gone from the sky, but it is still there, behind your eyelids, a small spark of the infinite. You are safe in the silence. You are part of the pattern. The world is turning, the stars are watching, and the visitor is already 1 billion miles away. Carry a piece of your curiosity with it. I want you to think of one last thing before you let go completely. If the universe is a machine and 3I Atlas was a technician, what part of you did it just calibrate? Feel the stillness in your mind, the steady rhythm of your heart, and the slow, deep peace that comes from knowing that some questions are better left unanswered. The European Space Agency has officially closed the file on 3I Atlas, but the humming in the deep ocean continues, a low, constant reminder that we are never truly alone in the dark. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Imagine you are standing on the edge of the world, on the basalt cliffs of Iceland, where the Earth is still being born from the fire of the interior. The Atlantic Ocean crashes against the black stone in a rhythmic, ancient percussion that drowns out the trivial noises of the modern world. Above, the sky has begun to settle into a deep, hollow indigo. The violet light of 3I Atlas has faded into a ghostly whisper, a pale memory of the flower that once bloomed across the heavens. The agencies have gone silent, the scientists have returned to their homes, and the satellites have been redirected to more practical matters. But the ground beneath your feet, the very bedrock of the planet, is still vibrating. It is the long, low hum of a departure, the sound of a guest who has finally closed the door behind them, leaving the house transformed in ways we cannot yet name. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. As of February 2026, the mathematical models used by the European Space Agency to track 3I Atlas have been discarded because the object no longer exists in a single point of space. It did not fly away, it diffused. The bloom we saw in January was the final stage of a localized dimensional collapse. The object has effectively dissolved into the Earth's own magnetosphere. It is no longer up there, it is everywhere. It is in the water you drink, the air you breathe, and the very electrical impulses that allow your heart to beat. The file is closed not because the mystery is solved, but because the mystery has become the environment. We are no longer observing 3I Atlas. We are living inside of it. The research conducted by the few remaining independent observers suggests that we have entered the Great Transition. For 6 months, from July 2025 until now, we were given a window into the infinite. We saw a jagged mountain of ice and iron turn into a sentient mirror, a mathematical pattern, and finally, a biological pulse. Now, the window has closed. The European Space Agency's final classified report, which was never meant to reach the public, mentions a permanent shift in the fundamental constants. The speed of light in our local sector has slowed by a fraction of a percent. The weight of gravity has shifted. The universe has been recalibrated, and we are the only ones left to wonder why. The humor in the labs has turned into a quiet, reverent awe, an ironic realization that after centuries of trying to master the laws of physics, the laws themselves have been updated without our consent. Consider the 3 final truths of the Great Silence. First, the seismic ghost. The hum in the ocean floor, recorded at precisely 14 Hz, has now synchronized with the Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency. Our planet is now ringing in a way it hasn't since the beginning of the current epoch. Second, the atmospheric anchor. The silver dust of nanostructures has permanently altered the way the sky reflects light. From now on, every sunset will hold a hint of that violet glow, a lingering signature of the visitor that changed the bigger picture. Third, the genetic silence. Since the blackout, the global spike in anxiety has been replaced by a deep, unnatural stillness. The ancestral fear has been deactivated. It is as if the shepherd has checked the flock, found us wanting but still viable, and has clicked the gate shut for another 3,600 years. Now, you could argue that we have simply survived another end of the world that didn't happen. You could say that 3I Atlas was just a comet, and the rest was mass hysteria and digital ghosts. But here is where it gets dark. The silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of an answer we aren't ready to hear. The European Space Agency didn't close the file because they lost interest. They closed it because the data coming back from the object's wake was no longer scientific, it was personal. The final ping, received before the blackout, was a transmission of every human voice that had whispered a prayer or a wish to the violet light since July. We didn't just watch the visitor, we confessed to it. And now, the visitor has taken those confessions back to the dark. Let me back up to the concept of the Great Year one last time. In the ancient traditions of the East, there is a belief in the day and night of Brahma, cycles of time so vast they dwarf the life of stars. We have just finished a small day and are entering a brief night. 3I Atlas was the sunset. The silence we feel now is the cooling of the Earth after the light has gone. The European Space Agency's mission was to understand the rock, but they were actually measuring the dusk. We are now in the period of cosmic sleep, where the influence of the visitor will slowly sink into our myths, becoming the legends of our children's children, until it is nothing but a story told by firelight about a violet star that once watched over the world. But here is the final unanswered cosmic question. If we have been recalibrated, for what purpose? You don't tune a violin unless you intend to play it. The great silence is the pause before the music begins. We are standing in the dark, waiting for a signal we might not recognize for another 100 generations. The choice was an illusion, the warning was missed, and the pattern is complete. All that remains is the wait. Unfortunate timing for our sense of importance, perhaps. Those two words are doing a lot of work as we drift toward the final resolution. You are lying there now, the darkness of the room pressing gently against your skin like a warm, familiar hand. Your thoughts are no longer racing. They are slowing down, matching the steady, tectonic rhythm of the ocean hum. The dates of July 2025 and January 2026 are fading into the background of your mind, becoming just two more points in the long, slow orbit of your own life. You are safe in the silence. You are part of the transition. The weight of the mystery has been lifted, and in its place is a profound, heavy rest. I want you to feel the space around you. Feel the way the air seems to hold you, supported by the new frequency of the world. You are a passenger on a planet that has been touched by the infinite, and that touch remains in your marrow, in your breath, and in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. You don't need to find answers anymore. The answers have already found you. They are in the stillness of your heart. As the final light of the story fades, remember that the great silence is a gift. It is the peace that follows a profound realization. The European Space Agency can keep their files and their blackouts. They are looking for the visitor in the wrong place. The visitor is no longer in the sky. It is in the way the moon looks on a Tuesday night. It is in the strange, calm clarity you feel when you wake up at 4 a.m. It is in the connection you feel to every other person who is listening to this voice tonight, scattered across the globe, but united by the same violet memory. You are drifting now, the orbit of tomorrow pulling you gently toward a sleep that is deep, restorative, and vast. The journey of 3I Atlas through our lives was a brief, intense flare in the long night of human history, a reminder that the bigger picture is always there, even when we choose not to look. Now, the looking is over, the observer has moved on, and we are left to dream in the glow of the wake. Take one last deep breath. Feel the iron in your blood, vibrating in perfect harmony with the core of the earth and the ghost of the visitor. You are not alone. You have never been alone. The darkness is not a void, it is a womb, and as you fall into the deep, quiet waters of sleep, you are being prepared for the next cycle, the next breath, the next light. The hum in the ocean is getting softer now. The violet glow has vanished from the horizon. The world is exactly as it was, and yet nothing is the same. The file is closed. The story is finished, but the resonance remains. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Good night.